The Chinese government is weaponizing archaeology, and it has far-reaching implications for the past as well as the present. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. We're getting there. I'm making a push to get China Uncensored to 2 million subscribers by the end of the year. When I started a few weeks ago, we needed 40,000 subscribers. Now, it's down to just 20,000 more. So if you're watching and you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, again, remember, make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube has been secretly unsubscribing people. But on with the show. When it was first established as a modern discipline, it was difficult to spell archaeology without politics. Figuratively, of course. That word would have looked crazy if I meant that literally. Throughout the 19th and early 20th century, the European powers organized archaeological excavations across their vast global empires. But these ventures were less about enriching the cultures and peoples in the colonial territories and more about hauling treasures back to Europe and amassing more historical artifacts in national museums than other European rivals. Then, with the rise of fascism and dictatorships in Europe in the 1920s and 30s, archaeology in several countries became about serving dominant authoritarian and totalitarian narratives. Man, and here I thought archaeology was all about looking for ancient treasures in trap-filled ruins. In Spain, the Franco regime used archaeology to present a vision of a unified Iberian past after the bloody and divisive Spanish Civil War. Around the same time in Germany, the Nazi regime directed archaeologists to search for evidence to support its theories that Germans were descended from a superior race. This included a hunt for Atlantis in the North Atlantic, as well as a global search for the Ark of the Covenant, no joke. That last one didn't go so well for the Nazis because, according to a documentary I saw, when they found the Ark and opened it, mean spirits emerged and melted their faces. However, following the end of World War II, much of Europe abandoned extreme state ideologies, allowing for archaeology to become more depoliticized. But while much of the world since then has been untangling politics and archaeology, in China, they have recently been busy gluing the two together. Here, it's important to bear in mind, though, that in China, archaeology has been viewed as a branch of history for a long time. And the ruling Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, strictly polices the telling of history. Almost as hard as they policed Tiananmen Square in June of 1989, where nothing happened. I don't know why I was so specific with the date. Yet even by Chinese standards, in the last few years, there has been a growing focus on connecting state narratives with archaeological discoveries, especially in the western regions of Tibet and Xinjiang. Now, before the CCP came to power, both Tibet and Xinjiang largely existed outside Chinese central control. They even had their own flags. Even today, the majority of the people inhabiting the two regions have different cultures, religions, and languages than the Han Chinese people that dominate inner China. This is why it often rings very hollow when Chinese state officials and state media justify the oppressive Chinese control of the two regions with things like, it's indisputable that Xizang, Tibet, has been a part of China since ancient times, or that Xinjiang, which means the new frontier, is an integral part of Chinese civilization. Their version of history is a worse fan fiction than the one I wrote for How Gilmore Girls Should Have Ended, which was excellent, and I'm still petitioning for one more season to make things right. In fact, it seems like the Chinese authorities are well aware that they are pushing a weak narrative, since they found it necessary to detain as many as 1 million Muslims in so-called re-education camps across Xinjiang, where they're being taught the glorious history of China by their friendly teacher, Miss Jen O. Said. And now in the CCP's fight to strengthen the government narrative about Tibet and Xinjiang, even archaeology is a weapon. Discoveries made near Buddhist structures in Xinjiang have been claimed to be similar to artifacts dug up in Han-dominated eastern China. Following the discoveries, the head of China's Ethnic Affairs Commission said that the artifacts prove that there is no separation between the culture of Xinjiang and Chinese culture, and that those who criticize China's policies in the region reveal their ignorance of history and are peddling baseless narratives. Man, the only thing worse than someone who's ignorant is someone who's ignorant and confident, and lying and committing human rights abuses. If such a Chinese understanding takes hold, it could dilute rulings like this one about the Chinese authorities committing a cultural genocide in Xinjiang. After all, you're not stripping anyone of their cultural identity by forcing them to become Chinese if history shows that they were Chinese all along. Meanwhile, in Tibet, a series of tombs have been unearthed near the Tibetan capital of Lhasa, containing relics reportedly featuring typical characteristics from the plains of central China and neighboring cultures. It was reported in Chinese state-run media that the discoveries allegedly provide evidence explaining how different ethnic groups came together, and that archaeological material and scientific evidence can now offer even more convincing proof of how different ethnic groups in China formed a shared community. In China, of course, including Tibet and Xinjiang, since they were historically always part of China and were never separate nations. Such words very much align with those of Chinese leader Xi Jinping when he talks about a strong sense of community for the Chinese nation that will guide people of all ethnic groups to uphold the vision of a community with a shared future. And so, with a wave of questionable archaeology, China's ethnic minorities are being pushed ever tighter into the suffocating embrace of the CCP. A real bear hug, you might say. Seriously, don't share this pic. She would be so mad. The politicization of Chinese archaeology has moved even further west than Tibet and Xinjiang. On the plains of southern Uzbekistan and Central Asia, Chinese scientists are searching for clues about the fate of a mysterious nomadic tribe with roots in what is today China that could rewrite the history of the ancient Silk Road. The Silk Road was a series of trade routes that for centuries stretched from China in the east all the way to Europe in the west. Uh-oh. How far west is China going to try and say their roots extend? Are they going to say, here is definitive proof America has Chinese origins, showing an old Panda Express receipt? An international relations professor at China's Lanzhou University told the South China Morning Post that such archaeological projects can strengthen cultural and human-to-human exchanges, which could then help promote the Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is a series of modern-day infrastructure projects which are to some extent modeled on the same routes and geography of the old Silk Road. Except a road actually made of silk would be way more structurally sound than anything the BRI has produced so far. When Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni visited China last month, Xi Jinping said that China and Italy should uphold and promote the Silk Road spirit. During Meloni's visit, in an attempt to boost the idea of a Silk Road spirit, Chinese state media even went as far as highlighting the Italian medieval explorer Marco Polo, who reached China in the 13th century using the old Silk Road. Which is impressive since Marco Polo was blind and navigated by shouting his first name and waiting for other people to yell his last name. Italy was also framed as a bridge between East and West, with a role in maintaining road access for China. Because when Marco Polo set out on the old Silk Road, it was definitely with the dream of turning Italy into a superhighway for vast quantities of cheap Chinese goods to flood the European market in the 21st century. If that's true, he really was blind. Beyond using archaeology and history abroad to push for the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese researchers have also traveled to Kenya and Saudi Arabia to look for traces of Chinese seafarers from the 15th century. In the South China Sea, where Beijing is aggressively pursuing territorial claims against other countries, such as the Philippines, Chinese scientists are also scouring centuries-old Chinese shipwrecks that could help bolster Beijing's disputed claims over maritime territory. But this CCP archaeology has also expanded past the confines of Han Chinese historical activity. A recent new archaeological hub has been launched in the eastern Chinese province of Fujian, with the aim of studying Austronesian languages. Already in 2020, the subject of Austronesian languages was recognized as possessing national-level importance. An Austronesian-themed folk culture park and a special agricultural sightseeing park are also in the planning phase in Fujian, as are a number of cultural and creative products and travel routes. So why the sudden archaeological and historical interest in Austronesian languages? The answer lies about 100 miles off the coast of Fujian, the sovereign island state of Taiwan. The CCP will throw a temper tantrum if you tell them that Taiwan is not part of the People's Republic of China, partly because they're busy trying to convince the world the opposite. And just look at all the evidence they made up out of thin air. Isn't that enough to convince you? The problem with that narrative is that it isn't true. Not only was Taiwan not under any sort of central Chinese control until the 17th century, but for most of recorded history, Taiwan was primarily inhabited by Austronesian people, not Han Chinese. But if Chinese archaeologists can find a way to tie Taiwan's Austronesian past to Fujian, it can help strengthen the claim that Taiwan has been a part of China since ancient times. And certainly seems like that is the direction that Beijing wants to go when state media Global Times reported that pottery pieces reveal the exchanges between the Chinese mainland and the island of Taiwan in prehistoric times. On top of that, it's an established scientific theory today that Taiwan is the place from where Austronesians first set out on a grand expansion that would eventually take them as far as Hawaii and New Zealand in the east and Madagascar in the west. So if discoveries in Fujian reveal that the Austronesian people of Taiwan are connected to China, then by extension, all Austronesian people are connected to China. Do you hear that, people of Hawaii? You might be Chinese soon. So say aloha to your freedom and aloha to your new brutal overlords. The thing about digging into the past with a particular narrative in mind is that people can turn what they find into exactly what they were looking for, especially in a place where history is less than an academic discipline and more of a propaganda tool. This is amplified when we get into prehistoric topics like the origins of the Austronesian people or the existence of mysterious nomadic groups on the ancient Silk Road. Since historical records are often scarce, leaving more room for archaeology to lead the way. At the same time, in regions like Xinjiang and Tibet, outside researchers have limited access, and around places like the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, Beijing has a lot more resources to throw behind archaeological research than the much smaller neighboring states. The CCP thus has a lot of room to interpret or reinterpret history as they see fit based on Chinese archaeological discoveries. And it becomes a problem for the rest of us if politicized Chinese archaeology begins to lead to a broader reinterpretation of world history. After all, as the eerie saying goes, those who control the past control the future. So if we can get Indiana Jones on some of this soon, please, that would be great. Because China's version of history is so dumb, it's making my face melt. This is why China Uncensored makes these videos, to spread the word of the misdeeds of the Chinese Communist Party so they can't get away with it. Join me in spreading the message by supporting China Uncensored on patreon.com/China Uncensored. You can contribute however much you want, but you could even do as little as $1 an episode. And as a thank you, I'll respond to your questions or comments at the end of these episodes. Today's comes from Lily Chen. You know, each year I get older and each year I start to understand why my mom moved us out of Taiwan and immigrated to America. The bandits that stole the mainland from China will never be satisfied. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. These countries should not tolerate this type of action. We need a Pacific NATO and an expanded and revived TPP to bind us together economically. It's what kept the Soviets on their side of the wall, and it will keep the CCP on the mainland. Also, F Xi for breaking our 18-year family tradition. I couldn't visit family in July because it was too dangerous. You're absolutely right, Lily. The Chinese communists will never be satisfied. Just look at what they did to Hong Kong. They want Taiwan, and if they get that, they won't be satisfied either. This archaeological propaganda is showing that, because their goal is total world domination. They will come for us in America. They really already have. China's already hit the US with economic warfare. Just look at how they gutted American manufacturing with the help of American collaborators. Chinese fentanyl alone is killing tens of thousands of Americans a year. So you're right, the rest of the world needs to do something to push back, because otherwise the whole world will go red. Thanks for your support, and I'm sorry you weren't able to get back to Taiwan this year. Thank you for watching. Join me on Patreon by clicking that orange button. And here's a video I want to show you about how China is also invading the video game industry. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.